Hey there guys, welcome back to Enlarge Deck Profile with yours truly. Today we are taking a look at my most recent deck, Athenia Control. It's been piloted on the channel now for a few times. The deck is finally ready to show you, and so without further ado, let's jump right into things.
This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for products, and FoulLibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists, as well as our guest lecturer members King Pearlshine, Vite Ramen, Mognite, and Darren Noblock. Class is in session.
Alright guys, we're talking Order Athenia today, a High God ruler with 3 different kinds of attributes on her front side. That almost never matters in the decks that I build, but this deck has been something of interest for my deck building ever since Olmo Fernandez piloted this to a top 8 finish a few years ago. And so I've not seen her since, and so I continue to experiment with this ruler. I think she's very fascinating in the way that she sort of has one set of abilities on her front side and a different set on the other side when it comes down to her cards. So she's a Tails ruler, which means you don't get to use villains. She has Revolution Order, and then she has Force Command Death on her front side and Force Command Rebirth on her flip side. So Rebirth is a little bit more difficult to access with this ruler than other rulers, because when it comes down to ordering, you don't want to order too many times with this particular ruler. It's one of those things where you use Death on her front side more often than you use Rebirth. But when you use Rebirth, oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff that happens with this particular ruler. So let's get into that. So in the past, you might have noticed that I've used a deck list that enabled what I used to call the Athenia Death Loop. That's still present in this deck, but to a much lighter note, because we've lost the ability to play Harvesting Season on 1 consistently. So instead, I opted to shift gears and play a little bit of a different package. First of all, we're playing 4 Mikage Rhea. This is really easy to dump a lot of darkness cards into the graveyard. I'm personally using the new art here because it's gorgeous, and it's just absolutely fantastic that we're getting a reprint of this, and this art looks absolutely fantastic. But she bins a darkness card from your deck, she gives all your vampires drain, she has flying, and most importantly, she has quick cast. And then whenever she's banished by a mage art, yes, we are playing Part of True Power, which is a mage art, you can put her back into your hand instead of putting it into the graveyard. Very, very, very helpful for that. Very solid card to have just the ability to bin anything. Of course, we're playing the main boss monster and the main starter of the deck, Boruzuki Vampire Astrologian. You enter, look at the top 3, and then you put 1 in your hand, 1 in the grave, 1 in the RFG. This is really good to dig deep. And then you get +1/+1 counters based on what your graveyard and RFG looks like. If she's ordered, and anytime a card is put from the RFG into the graveyard, she gets 2 +1/+1 counters, and there's a lot of ways to abuse that in this list. She can also remove a +1/+1 counter to give -2/-2 to J Resonators your opponent controls until the end of the turn. This card is absolutely nuts in this deck. There's like so much that this card does for the deck that you obviously play for and never look back. Playing 1 Justice's Recon Drone. Now, why am I playing this? Because has anyone ever played this card in combination with Athenia? It's because you can banish it to bring back an addition from your graveyard and put it into the field. It also lets you get a little bit of hand knowledge. It's flying, it's quick cast, it's got some value in that regard. But really what you can do is banish it to bring back any of your additions that get binned. So for instance, your Tree of Growth. If you end up milling this card, you're not able to put cards from the RFG back into the graveyard and gain life, etc. But you also would want your Tree of Decay, which is a different kind of win condition. You can use this multiple times to get a lot of different effects from it. You can only use it once per turn, but as soon as you have enough cards in the graveyard, this card is absolutely a win condition all its own. It also is really good at putting cards in the RFG so that Tree of Growth can put them into the graveyard again. So absolutely bonkers combinations of cards. And there were times where I really did just feel like I needed some way of buying back additions that wasn't too expensive. So I'm putting just 1 because I can buy it back with cards like Castle of Beatrice here. Castle of Beatrice is really easy to get back, so if I end up binning this card, I can just buy it back with Castle of Beatrice. Of course, in addition to all of this, Athenia needs mill cards to facilitate her win condition. So she's playing 4 copies of Mikage Shinjiro. He's also pretty decent as a resonator and as a body that you can order, because you can play stuff from your RFG, so you can pay something for his, you can pay his cost with cards being removed from the graveyard, and then you can just animate one of those on your turn in addition to his being played. So in a lot of ways, he is a one card 15/15 flying drain for 1 will. That's really, really solid. An engine all on his own. His companion in this is the Death Speaker Monk. This came out with the support for Asuka. So basically the exact same effect, a different enter ability, but basically the exact same discard effect. For 1 darkness, discard this card, and then mill 3 cards from the top of your deck. This card also has some value in that it can revive things. And if you're wondering how does that all work with Castle of Beatrice in the graveyard, Death Scythe is a mandatory card in this list. You can remove your Castle of Beatrice as part of the cost, and then you're effectively turning off your own Castle of Beatrice if you want to, and then there are cards and ways to put it back into the grave, so you can continue to protect your grave whenever you want to, which is helpful because you have Griffin racing across darkness. This is a recent addition to the list. This absolutely changed the way the deck played. This card's been with us for a very long time, but basically it comes in and you put the top 2 cards of your stone deck into the field, and that's recovered, which is really, really, really crazy. So like on turn 2 or 3, jumping ahead to turn 5 for your mana base is really solid. And of course you get to do that with Part of True Power and Rhea. So there's like little tiny engines and little tiny synergies all throughout this list, which I really find helpful. We have Athenia enters the Game of Gods. This is a ridiculous spell. Even if you're not going for the death loop, this thing is absolutely wild in the fact that you just get to remove 3 cards from your graveyard, and if you do, that's an effect by the way, it's not a cost, if you do, you draw that many cards, which is really, really helpful. Not to mention that your opponent has to banish a resonator, and if they can't, they discard a card instead, which is really solid. That may enable some things for your opponent, but if you do this enough times, the value that it creates is more important than not. We're also playing 3 Essence of Athenia's Power. This allows you to do some really funny things if you don't have any of your trees. So you can remove people's graveyards from the game. If you're playing against decks like Arc or Solaria, which I believe you saw that in Jeremy's match with me, I was able to Essence of Athenia's Power his RFG into the graveyard so he couldn't solarize very easily. This card is strangely relevant right now in a way that I didn't think it was, and then it just exists, and it just works with the engine so well. So you're playing at least 3 of this. I'm playing 3 Kilo Fossil Girl in the City. This is a good way of stopping automatic effects while also getting rid of additions potentially as well. So this card is very solid, and it's in color. And then last but not least, I'm playing 2 Roar of Dark Blessing. This used to be Soul Hunt in the list because sometimes you just got really awkward hands. So if you ended up with a Death Scythe in your hand and you're like, I don't want to play this, or you get a Castle of Beatrice in your hand, or you're like, I'm in a situation in which I have a card I just don't want. You needed some way of getting rid of that card in your hand, and Roar of Dark Blessing is a really good way of doing that because you're just fueling your RFG, but you're also making your opponent lose advantage, potentially getting rid of all the dead cards in your hand, which you can just refill with Athenia Enters the Game of Gods. It's very funny that way. But this card is very helpful in that there have been times where I've sat and thought, could I just get rid of my hand with my board state and just make my opponent just lose the game? This card is very funny in that way, so very interesting in that sense. Or I guess in this case, if you also draw a Griffin racing across darkness and you don't want it in your hand, this is a good way of getting it out and into the RFG and into rotation. Magic Stones include 3 Secret Stone of the Ethereal Moon. We're actually playing a significant amount of reasons to play blue in this deck. In the main board, you have Castle of Beatrice. Being able to buy back several things on your turn is not too bad of a thing to have. But you also have Muse Staring At. This is a really solid card if you end up milling it. It has Remnant, and this card is really good at countering some of the meta's most prolific decks out there. This card is definitely going to get a lot of mileage because we've seen the highest high of decks kind of be brought low with the recent ban list and erratas that have been happening. So this card has just gotten even more powerful because it was already trying to keep those decks in check anyway. So this card is really solid, and you need blue for that. Playing 4 Darkness Moon Fragment, being able to say what's on the top of my deck and then play a Borazuki to see if I can get that card into my hand is pretty good. There's a lot of ways to manipulate the top of the deck, and then it's in color, so that's really helpful as well. So things like Borazuki, really helpful for getting that card in hand, or if you just want to mill and get rid of it, that's also really helpful. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. The Foresee here goes a long way. And then I'm playing 3 Magic Stone of Moonshade. Cannot wait to get this this art again. This was such a cool promo. But this is just sort of to round out, to have sort of like a quote-unquote tri-stone in order to be able to access different things in the deck. It can be a blue stone and you need it to be a blue stone. It could be a green or black, whatever you need it to be. And the life loss, it is kind of inconvenient against aggro, as it's always going to be, but again, all of your vampires have Drain, so MegaDryBone gives them Drain if they somehow don't have it already. Borazuki and Mikage Shinjiro already have Drain, so I don't know how you're losing it, but if you need it again, MegaDryBone is going to give that to you. Just a very solid way to get back that life loss that you've used. There, guys, just tuning in here as I'm doing some editing, and I realized that I'm actually missing a card, and that is 1 Replicant Odin. This card in the list is kind of nuts. I love it. It's very easy to get to, and especially with Moonshades, this card is very consistent to make. You don't get it off of part of True Power and get the effect, unfortunately, but you can bin it with MegaDryBone and then buy it back with your Castle of Beatrice. If you ever get to the point where you're like, I'm also going to dump Castle of Beatrice in this game, it's a really good way of buying back Replicant Odin and putting it into your hand so you can blow up the field. I found this card very easy to make very often, and I see it a lot more than you would think at 1. So just wanted to make sure that you guys saw that in here. In the sideboard, I'm playing 3 Witch of the Quenchfire. This card is helpful. You get 1 Moonshade, it's already online. You're already looking at turn 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there to get your Stone Engine online. And so with Witch of the Quenchfire, just being able to shut down a lot of burn decks at the local level, this is very much needed, especially at my locals. We play 3 Elixirs Love, and the 1 Athenia enters the Game of Gods alongside Death and Rebirth. This is the death loop. You just essentially side out certain cards, and you get to just loop your opponent to death. Basically, the cards that you would take out are your Castles of Beatrice, your Roars of Dark Blessing, your Griffins, your Part of True Powers, anything like that where it just sort of gets kind of gummed up. Those are really good 8-card slots to remove things from, and then you can just slot in those 6 cards. The other cards you could take out potentially could make room for things like Farrer's Spell to protect the combo, which is in the sideboard for that reason. If you're playing against control, the Death Loop is definitely the way to go, in my opinion. Thing to note about Death and Rebirth, the additional cost text does exist on this card. It does not exist on Athenia Enters the Game of Gods, so this gets around Castle of Beatrice, just like Death Scythe does, or the trees do, because all of that is based on a cost. So that's something really funny this deck can do. It can get around its own Castle of Beatrice relatively easily while also protecting your graveyard and giving you recursions, things like that. So this deck is just really fun. There's a lot of really cool things this deck can do. This is my current honed version of it. I've been playing this for several weeks trying to get this down to a science, and I think I would be comfortable piloting this at some sort of event. And if it's right, who knows? This thing could really, really take off. Well, let me know what you guys think. Do you like this list? Would you do things differently? Would you play it differently? I know there are definitely people who have asked me about this deck in the past, and so here's the next iteration, guys. Have at it and have fun. Without further ado, guys, let us know what you think down in the comment section down below. Give us a like, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and definitely check out the new website in the description. There's a ton of different articles, including one on there for this deck down there as well. So without further ado, guys, this has been Paul signing off.